Hi, and welcome to SPP Industries and our tutorial on the assembly of the Romatech Roman blind system. In this tutorial, we will take you step by step through every process from the very beginning of laying the skin out to the finished product as you see hanging on the rack behind me here. It should be noted that what we are manufacturing here is a corded Roman shade. If your country designates that you must use a corded shroud, we haven't done that in this video, but we ask that you please adapt to suit as per your country's requirements. Before we get started on the assembly of the Romatech Roman blind, I'd like to point out a couple of tools that you will see me using during the process, and I'll show you what they actually do and why they were designed. The first tool that we have is what we call our applicator. Now, one of the benefits of working with the Romatech system is we have a from saw to skin process. So that means that this can actually be cut directly on the saw. Doesn't need to be filed, doesn't need to be trimmed or anything. The sharp edges are not a problem with this system. Now, I'll show you what we've got here is a piece of block-out fabric. Okay, this is the block-out line, same as the fabric that we're using here on the blind behind us. And I'd like to show you what will happen with this if we don't use the applicator. So we put our spline in, as you can see. Go to put our batten on. Now remember, this is a full block-out fabric. Now I've just got to slide that on with my fingers. Guide it on there. Now you can see what I've done. We can't get a really good look there, but you can probably get a very good look here. You can see here the damage caused to that. That's ruined now. That piece of fabric is absolutely ruined. Let me show you again. Fold it in a different spot. Same piece of profile. The batten with the patented applicator. Push it along, see how much easier that slides on. Now what I'll do is I'll take this off and have a look at that. You can see the difference between the two. You can see that the one there is completely damaged and the other one, there's not a mark. That's the secret behind the applicator. Now we have exactly the same system, which I'll show you for our base rail, our no-sew base rail. If I was to do exactly the same thing, straight from the saw, straight to the table, exactly the same thing happens, as you can see. Hopefully you can see without the glare. There we are. As you can see, that's ruined. Then we'll try that again with the applicator. These can be a little bit tight when they're first used, but they do loosen up. Straight on. Straight off, no problems, no tears, no rips. If you're currently making Roman shades of any kind, you don't need me to tell you how difficult it is to get them square, to get them straight, and to get your pocket spacing calculations correct. It can be very time consuming, and you do need fairly specifically trained people to be able to do this job. Well, that was before, this is now. What we have done at Romatech is we have designed an adhesive tape that fits onto a 60mm wide aluminium straight edge, such as this. Now what this does will become self-explanatory when we get into the tutorial part of the laying up of the shade, but basically it does your mathematics for you. By utilising the panel spacings chart, what we're going to do in the blind that we're going to manufacture in this tutorial, it's going to be a 1.55 metre drop, so 155 centimetres. So what we do is we look up to 155, which we can see on here, which is 155. Next to that, it has the numeral D8. Now, what that D8 refers to is our straight edge, which has all of the numerals and the numbers written on it. We need to follow and draw a line on every D up to number 8, and that will give you your perfect pocket spacing for the fold of that particular shade. It's as easy as that. Okay, now the time has come that we start to use our straight edges, and you remember earlier in this section we're doing a drop of 155, so our lines are measured at D8. Okay, so I've already pre-cut my skin to the correct width. I'm going to assume for this video's sake that you already have equipment to cut a skin for a roller blind, which is really all you need, or some form of cutting equipment. So we're going to start the video from the time that you've cut your skin to the size it required. Now our blind is 1030 wide, so that's obviously the width that we've cut. Our drop is 1550. Now I've added an extra 40 centimetres to allow for the head rail and for the base rail and the take up of the fabric for the battens when we place those on. You'll need to have that excess fabric. Okay, so we'll get started. What I've already done is I've got my straight edges on the table here, as you can see. I've placed one right against the edge of the table there, and I've measured from the inside across to 1030, and I've clamped that in place. I've come down to the other end down here. I've done the same thing and I've clamped it in place. So we know that our skin is the right width, okay, so that'll fit perfectly into those straight edges. As you can see, that sits in there very, very comfortably. So we'll just unroll this all the way out, pop it into place. Now, if you're doing a very wide blind, what we suggest that you do is actually tape it to the top of the table, the fabric, so it can't move when you're sliding your straight edge down. That's the last thing you really want to happen, because then your lines will be out of whack. Okay, so our straight edge, first line that we're going to mark is up the top here. It says no sew head rail line. Now that's what we're going to be using. We'll be using a chain drive head rail. So we're going to draw a line across there. And then there's another line under that that says top dash start of blind. We also want to draw that one. That's just for a reference really, which we'll show you a little bit later on. Now, as we specified, we're going to be doing D8. So I locate D1 as my first, across the table there, and what I will do, I'll just draw a line across. Now, if you've got a wider blind, again, you'll have a longer straight edge, you'll have somebody on the other side helping you. You'll just call out the numbers, you say D2, they'll go to D2, and then you draw your line across. But for this size blind, it's quite easy to do, just one. Now, this is repetitive. I'm going D1, D2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's all the same. So I'll speed this up to get down to the end of D8. And there we are. Okay, now that we've done our lines, what we're going to do is we're going to turn our skin on, so the lining facing down. And we'll start to put on our battens. Now fold this up to your first line that you see. And as you can see, we have a nice crisp line there to work with. Now, a handy hint here is to be prepared, prep your work area first, which I've done, helps speed up the process. Now, what I've done with my profiles, I've actually put the end cap on here first. And I'll show you the reason for that. So we put in our spline. And the hint that my staff gave me is that what you do is give it a little squirt of silicone in the top. If you've got a really long blind, it can sometimes be a bit tricky to slide it all the way across. It can be a bit tight. So we want to do it this way. Now hold the clear spline and the fabric together. You're pinching that together. You introduce the applicator to the fabric. And you push the rod. You don't pull from the applicator. That's a no-no. You actually push the rod onto, put your hand here, put your hand onto there, and the end cap stops it going too far. Take off your applicator at the end. Job's done. Now what we do is we always cut our profiles a little bit narrower than the width of the fabric, which hopefully you can see there. I'm trying to show you there what we've done. It's a little bit narrower. That allows for a little bit of give and take. If your skin's a little bit wider than it should be or a little bit narrower, you won't have to go back to the saw and recut your profile again. Now we've got that one on, we'll pack the end cap on the end. Beautiful. Now roll it over, up to our next line. Once again, crease. Clear spline. Now you will find those end caps a little bit tight to get on, and there's a reason for that. The harder they are to get on, the harder they are to get off. Very much in mind for child safety. Very hard to get off. And on that subject, if by any chance you have to remove that end cap for any reason during the manufacturing process, put it in the bin. It's no good. Once it's been used, there's a little catch inside of that end cap, and once it's been put on, it breaks that catch. That's what you use to lock it onto the batten. So it's once you take it off, if you put it back on, it'll be loose. It could fall off. Child will strangle themselves. You don't want to have that. Now what I'm doing here, I've got to do this 8 times because we had 8 lines. Just remember we had D8. So again, I'll just fast forward this. It's just repetitive. It's the same thing right up until we get to the end of the line. And there we are. Okay, so now we're ready to attach our head rail to our finished skin. First step that we do is we take a roll of double-sided tape and we put it just underneath the very top line. Remember we drew 2 lines earlier. The very top line, and then we had one underneath. Okay, so as you can see, we had our 2 lines. 1, 2, so our tape is put just underneath that top line. Now we cut that away. Peel off our tape. And apply our head rail spline to the very top of the blind on that double-sided tape. Just trim that off. It's okay there and there. Okay, get our head rail. Now what we do here, we fold over on the edge of that spline. It's a 15mm spline. It has to be around that size. If it's any smaller, it won't work. It will fall through the head rail. You need to have at least 15mm. What we do, okay, now hopefully you can see the way that is folded in there. You have your fold here, and it sits inside that edge, like that. Then pop in our end cap. Now we need to measure to make sure our cords are coming out equal distances from the end of the blind. That one's coming out at 20 centimetres, and so is that one. So that's great. The guys in our prefabrication department have done a great job. Okay, so what we need to do now, pull your cords back here. We need to pull up every second batten to the top of the blind. Next one. Next there. So we now have 4 battens we can see. Push that down. You're not doing it any harm by doing that. We need to mark where our rings go. So what we do is lay a square against the headboard to where the cord comes out and put a little mark again with grey lead, because you can wipe this off. And it's a lot better than pen, because you're not going to make any mistakes by putting pen onto your blind that you can't get off. Pencil you can always take off with an eraser. Okay, now these little twist rings, these have been designed to be very comfortable to fit inside the fingers, so you're not going to get any sharp edges, any ripping, tearing or cutting. Very, very comfortable. You just put them in and turn them 180 degrees. It's just not 180, it's 90, my apologies. Okay, then we get our cord. This will happen from time to time, can be frustrating. Okay, now we'll turn the blind around. Sit it up at the top of the table. Bring it down. Now, it's a good idea here, if you can. Hopefully you can see this. Now, what I'm going to do is clamp the headrail level with the end of the table. We need to work out what our dropper is going to be. Now, we know already that our dropper is established at 155, but you can see when I pull this, there's a lot of spring in that blind. So what you always want to try and work from the middle of the blind, put your tape measure up to the headrail, like this, and then pull until you've taken the slack out of the blind. You can sort of feel the point where it's going to want to spring back or stay down. So that's where you really want to be, to that point. Push your tape measure right up, and we do our mark at 155, which is where we want our drop to be. Okay. Now the next step is to grab your ruler and push it up into the bottom of that rail there, and you can find your mark, and you mark it, it's one, in this case it's 17 centimetres. So I'm doing a mark at 17 centimetres. You draw a line across there. Now this is going to be for a covered base rail. So what we're going to do now for a covered base rail is we're going to measure up from that line 5 centimetres and then down from that point 89 millimetres. So up 5 centimetres, down 89. Up 5, down 89. Now we draw both those lines. And it's the very bottom line that you cut away. So you can see there, I hope you can see we still have 2 lines. This is basically going to be the drop of your blind, the very bottom. This is where we need to fold to attach our base rail. Okay, so when you get to this step, we need to fold that up face to face, find that crease line, or that marked line. And like you did with your profile, fold on that line. So this is how it should look. Fold it on this line here. 1 line there and your base, okay? And exactly the same as we did with our profile, we now have our base rail. Just a little squirt silicone. Our base rail applicator. This is a new one. They can be a little bit tricky when they're brand new to get on, but they do loosen up after a while. Exactly the same system as before. Okay, now fold that back out again, so you've got your base rail and your line and the end of the blind there. Now what we need to do is get our double-sided tape. Place it on the front of the blind. This does not have to be in the exact position. If you're a little bit crooked, it doesn't matter, it's fine. It's just there to adhere the fabric to the front. That's all. Next step, we stand it up, fold it down, and you will see when you folded that back over, that second line should be right underneath where the base rail is, so you know you're right on the money. That's exactly where the drop needed to be. Okay, the next step, with the double-sided tape, you push that against the top opening of the base rail itself. Don't actually stick it to the top part, just underneath the opening. You can actually see this in a lot more detail if you have a look at the Romatech base rail application and how to assemble. It's a tutorial on the base rails. It explains all this in detail. We now fold that up. Now we introduce a very important tool. I'm not sure what overseas visitors will call this, but we call this a butter knife, found in every kitchen drawer. Using the back of the butter knife, push your fabric down into the slot. So I'm pushing that way into the slot, as you can see. Now once I've done that, I then reverse and I push this way. And that locks the fabric into the channel with the tape, the excess tape that we had over that opening. And the next step is our silencio. Cut a little arrow. Again, all of this is explained in detail in the tutorial for the base rails. This seals the deal. This locks the fabric right into that channel, and it also stops that annoying noise that you might find with base rails when they're clanging along window edges. Box cutter, just trim that to size. Your end caps. And that's that part complete. You may get a few little stray. This is the very textured fabric. You get a few rings, you snip those off as you go. Okay, so the last part that we have now is we need to place our cord orbs onto here, which I will now get out and show you. Okay, so we thread our cord through the orb. Like so. Okay, so I'm going to put the blind up on the rack facing away from us so I can show you the back. There we are. Okay, this is going to be totally unlevel. So I'm actually releasing my cords all the way down. Then I'll slide the little orb up to just underneath the railing. So that's all, the cords are all the way down. Now I'm going to start pulling them up. It's a little bit down, so I'll just pull on that just a tiny bit to adjust it. A little bit more. That looks good. Now where that is, I now tie a knot because I know that that's in the right position. And I push that knot to right up underneath where that little orb is. So the orb can't slip through, like I showed earlier in this tutorial. And of course do a double knot because it's always safe. And finally, snip. And it doesn't matter, keep pulling the chain, it'll go the opposite direction and it'll come up nice and straight. There we are. I hope you found this tutorial informative and we've been successful in showing you how easy it is to fabricate shades using the Romatech system. Remember to jump onto our website to look for other tutorials on the Romatech products. Please feel free to call us or email at any time if you require any further information. Thank you.